Philip Pullman has lost the plot. Or at least that's how it's starting to look. I should be upfront. I was incredibly disappointed with The Secret Commonwealth, Book 2 in the Book of Dust trilogy. There were some big problems with it, and I mean big problems. I will warn you now, I'm gonna get into some minor spoilers for the book. I'm a little apprehensive about doing this piece because it's usually my policy to never go after authors. It's not my intention to tear down art, but to build it up. So I'll begin by setting the scene. I am a Philip Pullman fanboy, plain and simple. I have read the His Dark Materials trilogy 3 times over, and his book of essays, Demon Voices, twice. It changed my life, and I would even say it's one of my favorite books of all time. His Dark Materials is magical in every way. And while I've even seen some of the criticisms that readers have had for the 3rd book in the trilogy, The Amber Spyglass, I never even really bought into them. And I've really had no criticism for Pullman until now. You might even say that I'm blinded by my love for Pullman's style and Lyra's world. But I think it's important to explain all this beforehand because I want you to understand the place in which I'm coming from. Because this deconstruction is going to be all about his latest novel, The Secret Commonwealth, and it's not going to be pleasant. I'll try to explain things thoroughly, but I will be relying on those viewing this being at least somewhat familiar with this series. When the Book of Dust trilogy was announced and celebrated with the release of La Belle Sauvage, I was thrilled. Returning to this series is something that I had waited years for. However, I did enter with caution. La Belle Sauvage was not the book that I had hoped for. I frankly wanted Lyra back. But here's the thing, the story of Malcolm and his care for baby Lyra in his little boat during the events of the Great Flood swept me away. I was unsure going in, but once on board, I was taken in by Pullman's familiar style. I love his way with words, his characters, and the thoughtful musings that permeate his work. I even love the conflict and leisurely pace. La Belle Sauvage is a grim adventure, reading almost like a YA novel, but laced with adult themes. I came out of this book with a renewed passion for this world and a love for the new main character, Malcolm. But Pullman claimed that this wasn't going to be a prequel trilogy. It was soon announced that the 2nd book in the series, The Secret Commonwealth, would tie together the events of La Belle Sauvage and even some loose threads from the His Dark Materials trilogy to catalyze a new story that would take place after His Dark Materials and show us what happened with Lyra after the original trilogy. This news got me starving for book 2. In the end, Lyra and Pan might be my all-time favorite duo. So when it came out, it was my most anticipated novel of the year, and I was like a kid on Christmas when I got it from the bookstore. I dug in and I was roped in from the jump. Pullman's prose style is so familiar and beloved to me. When you read a lot of books, not all of them live up, and I was hungry for the workings of a seasoned master. If I had realized where this book was going early on, I might not have been so excited. But I really thought that there was a silver lining. I thought the book had something to say. I was okay with living through some of the rougher parts if it meant that there was going to be some sort of reward at the end. So that leads me to the first major problem with this novel. There is no reward, no payoff, no loose threads tied together. The book quickly becomes a slog through darkness and frankly gets worse as it goes. The opening act is actually just fine. It's interesting, it gets things going, and it's full of callbacks to La Belle Sauvage and the original trilogy. But it quickly loses charm. Here, Lyra and her demon Pan are at odds with each other, which sucks everything that used to be endearing about their relationship out of the text. Now, this isn't a bad arc on its own. I was on board with the idea of there being a conflict between the two, at face value, but the execution is simply off. It's overindulgent. Instead of the conflict serving as a beat or rewarding arc, it's kind of stagnant and spoils as the book goes on. It just kind of sits there and gets worse. The pair of once lovable characters are separated for most of the book, which leaves them trying to stand on their own and honestly failing as the chapters grow less and less interesting. It just gets more and more frustrating to read. But this is a symptom of a larger problem as well. It's not just Pan and Lyra that are at odds. Malcolm and Alice, two main attractions of La Belle Sauvage, were characters that I was looking forward to joining this story in some sort of meaningful way. Early on, it's satisfying to see these characters pop up in the story as people that have been around Lyra her whole life, playing seemingly small parts, but actually really important. But when they join the actual narrative, they're quickly tossed aside. And what little weight they do get to pull in the narrative is disappointing. The major problem of it all is a problem that many sequels struggle with when they lose the charm of the original. In The Secret Commonwealth, nearly all of our characters are separated and embarking on their own separate journeys. Which isn't all bad if they're going to reunite and tie back into each other in a meaningful way. But they never do. The subplots go on for way too long, and most of them have a bleak end. It's not that this book is all bad or unenjoyable from the jump, but that it feels like it betrays the reader as early as halfway through. It becomes self-indulgent and honestly tone-deaf. Even down to the nuts and bolts of the writing, it feels as if Pullman is simply too famous to be questioned by a professional editor. Making you wonder if during the writing of this book, he was mostly surrounded by yes men. Because honestly, there are a lot of things in this book that I don't think would fly if Pullman was a first-time author. The editor should have caught this stuff. Pullman even claimed that he had already written this book when he released La Belle Sauvage. Yet, the book took an incredibly long time to come out after La Belle Sauvage was released. It makes you wonder if this story was reworked a lot, or if there was some sort of turmoil behind the scenes. Like if Pullman himself might have been wondering where this book was going and how to tighten it up. So when the new trilogy was announced, I saw a lot of skepticism about Pullman returning to Lyra's world. I saw people say that it was just a cash grab, washed up authors returning to their cash cow properties just because they simply need another paycheck. But I defended him. I swore that this wasn't the case. I thought that this story had a lot more to say and a lot more to explain. But the problem is we're now 2 books into the series and not much has been said and even less explained. The Secret Commonwealth, frankly, just feels like a waste of words. It meanders too much and sucks the life out of the world and characters with the way that it indulges on the darkness of Lyra's new life, turning its back on much of what we've grown to love. Much of the book feels hopeless and nihilistic. I could even go through this book beat by beat and explain how some of the plot points don't even make sense. But this isn't a review of the book, and I don't want to go too deep into spoilers. It's not my intention to slander the name of one of my favorite authors, but more to deconstruct the broad principles of writing that I don't feel like were followed here. I wanted to get under the skin and come out with a moral of the story, a lesson learned. Here, one of the biggest takeaways is that characters need victories. You can have a dark book, but there needs to be at least something enjoyable about it. Some light at the end of the tunnel. And when The Secret Commonwealth ends, I did not feel like that was the case. It felt like we, the good guys, had lost. It's also important to note the tone of the original trilogy, as well as La Belle Sauvage, and how The Secret Commonwealth really deviates from that tone, feeling like it changes things up entirely. Pullman's work has always resonated with an adult audience, but been masked in a sort of YA skin. Whimsical stories about children in magical worlds. Even at their darkest, the books never lost their magic. Here in The Secret Commonwealth, all the magic is gone. And we're left with husks of characters that have been separated from everything that we loved about them to begin with. And for God's sakes, writers, please stop using sequels to separate all of the characters and the chemistry that we love. It doesn't work. It feels like throwing away groundwork that has already been laid. I'm still going to read the final book in this series when it comes out, because I still love this author. I want to hope that this series can be fixed, that he can change my mind, or the payoff will be worth the pain. But for now, with book 3 nowhere in sight, with no release date even being announced yet, these are my thoughts. Thank you guys for watching the video. I would love to hear your thoughts on the book itself, or on my take on the book. Let's discuss it in the comments below. Otherwise, like the video and subscribe for future content. I'll see you guys in the next video.